Good evening, HOB 7th grade students. This is Miss Gwidt. We're doing lesson 12.2, Energy Flow in Ecosystems. You have two essential questions today. What are the energy roles in an ecosystem? So who are the main players in the ecosystem? How does energy move through an ecosystem? Who eats what? Where do they get energy from? Okay, let's talk about the three energy roles. The three energy roles are producer, consumers, and decomposers. You don't need to write that down explicitly because I'm going to define them later for you. Producers are going to be anything that's green that gets their energy from the sun. Consumers are things, typically animals or other organisms that eat other things. And then you're going to have your decomposers. Now let's break this down and talk about just one thing at a time. Okay, the first energy role are the producers. Please write this definition down. A producer is an organism that can make its own food. An example would be plants, algae, and bacteria. Please write down an example in your notes. There's a spot for it. Okay, so photosynthesis. This is how the producer makes its own food. It doesn't go grocery shopping. It doesn't grow its own food. It gets it from the sunlight. And this you want to write down also. There's a spot on your notes about photosynthesis. So the plant gets the energy from the sunlight, and it uses the carbon dioxide from the air plus water and its own sugar, and it creates oxygen. And you can see in the picture here, this is a whole process. So producers make their own food through photosynthesis. Okay, let's talk about the second energy role. So you had producers, now you have consumers. Consumers are organisms that obtain energy by feeding on other organisms. And here you can see a bunch of pictures. Caterpillars, birds, moose, snakes, humans, chickens. They all eat something else. And we have to break down consumers because there are three specific types. Write this down. There's herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. These are three types of consumers. They all eat things for energy. An herbivore is an animal that eats only plants, like deer. Please write that down. A carnivore is an animal that only eats meat, like a lion. And an omnivore are animals that eat both plant and meat. That includes humans. We can eat both plants and meats. Now there's one more person or player in here, and that's going to be your scavengers. And those are specific carnivores that feed off of dead organisms. So vultures and catfish would be examples. Scavengers only eat things that are dead. It's usually meat, so that's why they're a carnivore, but it's got to be something dead. All right, we've talked about producers and consumers, and I've told you about the three kinds of consumers. Let's talk about decomposers. Decomposer, an organism that breaks down waste and dead organism and returns the raw materials to the ecosystem. Some examples would be worms, mushrooms, and bacteria. So your decomposers are usually in or near the soil, and they're breaking down all the dead things that have fallen to the ground, including animals and plants. And they're breaking down all that energy. All right, you've probably heard of the food chain before, and I want to talk a little bit about the food chain today. First of all, write this definition down. A food chain is a series of events in which one organism eats another and gets energy. In this food chain, this is an example, and you can see that there are a couple of different organisms here. The flower gets its energy from the sun. You do not need to write this down, so leave the space blank in your notes. So the flower gets the energy from the sun. The caterpillar eats the flower, so he gets energy from eating the flower. The frog eats the caterpillar, who got the energy from the flower from the sun. And then the snake eats the frog, and who eats the snake? Yes, the owl eats the snake. So that is a simple food chain. Please just write the definition. Another topic is a food web. A food web consists of many interconnected food chains. Please write that down. Here is a sample food web. Let's point out a few things about this food web. First of all, the first player is the producer, and they get their energy from the sun. They're the first organism in the food chain. They produce their own. The things or the organisms that eat the plants, like the snail and the grasshopper and the crayfish, they're called first level consumers. Okay, they eat only plants, so they're herbivores. And then something that might eat a snail or a grasshopper or a crayfish, that's called a second level consumer. So you've got a shrew, a heron, a gardener snake, and a frog. They will eat some sort of organism that's meat. Lastly, you have the third level consumer, and that's the red fox in this example, and he's going to eat the shrew or the heron, the gardener snake, or the frog. This is a food web. It's very interconnected, a lot of food chains. You can see all the different arrows. And of course you have the decomposer, and that is the player that consumes the waste of the remaining organisms of all of them. So if the frog dies, the mushroom will break down the frog's energy. If the red fox dies, then the mushroom's going to break that down too. And if a plant dies, the mushroom will break it down. So the decomposer breaks down all of that stuff. Lastly, we have the energy pyramid. This is kind of complex also. Energy pyramid shows the amount of energy that moves from one feeding level to another. Write that down. So who are the producers in this pyramid? The producers are going to be those green trees. They are plants. And what are the first level consumers? Who eats the plants? That's going to be your giraffes. Okay, now you can see that in the producer level, that's where most of the energy is available. There's more energy stored in those plants than anywhere else. And then the first level consumers, they eat those plants, but they only get 10% of the energy from the plants. So they don't get to pass on more than 10% at every level. Then the lion is the third level consumer. He might eat the giraffes, and he is going to have also only 10% energy passed up. So as you go up, there is less and less energy each time passed up. So as you go up, the number of organisms decreases and the amount of energy being passed also decreases. There's more energy down at the bottom of the pyramid in all these plants than there is way at the top at the lion. And that's what I have for you today. Please make sure that you've written all your definitions that were in red, and that you are ready for Monday and Tuesday for your B-Day classes. All right, this is Miss Gwidt signing off. I'll see you guys then. Bye.